like this, so they ran. And when they ran, then both the flanks were open for the Continentals. And so the British surrounded the Americans and slaughtered them. And on that day, Bannister Tarleton, a British cavalry commander, came in and said, no quarter to those who surrendered. No quarter to anybody. If you know what no quarter means, it means no mercy. Quarter is mercy. And so he said no mercy to anybody. So if you were surrendering, they shot you, they stabbed you, they killed you, basically, that day. And so there was a great slaughter of Americans that day. Well, Tarleton had won this battle, and they had done it decisively. They went on and went up to the Battle of Cowpens, South Carolina. At Cowpens, Colonel Morgan with the American forces had heard of what had happened at Camden, and so he had his regulars, and he told the militia, I want you to go up here and give me one shot each. I want one bullet from you. Well, what was an American frontiersman known for in that day? His accuracy. Exactly. You hear of snipers today being very accurate. There is a writing of some British scouts. They had ridden, and they were about 200 yards away from, maybe 300 yards away from American troops that were crossing a river. They dismounted their horses and were standing there watching the Americans. They saw one particular American get off, step out of line, start loading his rifle, lay down on the ground, and take aim at him. They both looked at each other and said, what's this fool doing? He can't hit us from this distance. Well, about that time, they saw the puff of smoke rise, and the horse that was standing right behind them fell over. He had shot and hit the horse where he had passed between the two officers and hit the horse. At which time the two officers got out of there and said, we understand about American riflemen and their accuracy and the distance that they could shoot. And so Washington used that to his advantage as well. He had a couple regiments. We had what was called a hunting frock, which was a linen coat that the American riflemen wore. And the British knew that the American riflemen wore these frocks. And so basically he had a complete regiment of 1,000 men in rifle frocks, so they knew that these 1,000 men were now snipers, to put it in today's context. But the riflemen of that day, Morgan told them, give me one shot. Do you know how to tell an officer from an enlisted man? I'm an enlisted man. No ranking on my uniform whatsoever. Nothing on my shoulders. A sergeant would have a small green epaulet on one shoulder. A lieutenant would be a slightly larger epaulet. And as you go up in rank, the larger the epaulets on your shoulders would be. Whether you'd have one or two, captain, major, general, you would have larger, more ornate epaulets on your shoulder. So you could tell very easily who an officer was and who was not. And Morgan's command to his militia, fire one shot, then leave. I don't care. But I want you to shoot at somebody with something on their shoulder. Take out the leaders, was his command. So, his militia went up there, did their job, they were leaving. He stepped off the battlefield, pursued them, and asked them if they would come and fight some more. Well, Lieutenant Bush, who was leading one of the regiments up toward the British, saw that he was ahead of the other regiments. So in orderly fashion, he told his company to about face and march. And as they were marching, the British saw the Americans are retreating. They're leaving the field. We've won the battle. Well, their sergeants and leaders were dead, so they were more of a mob, started chasing the Americans. Well, Bush had glanced over his shoulder and saw that the mob of British soldiers were almost upon them, so he yelled to his company, about face, fire. So the men about face dropped their muskets to their hip, pulled the trigger. And with a sudden volley of bullets from the Americans, the British line was decimated. There was no leaders to keep them in line, so they turned and ran. And so it was a great victory for the Americans at that day. And the Americans won Cowpens through that. And then the next battle, Kings Mountain. And with this victory, went out to the loyalists in the area. You don't want to fight. Stay home. And another big thing of the time was if you were a loyalist and your neighbor was a rebel, was for independence, it was fine for one or both of you to fight each other. If I left the house and I left my wife and children at home and I was gone for a couple of days, well, the loyal, and I'm for freedom, my loyalist neighbors would come in and burn my house. Well, first they would bar the doors shut, so anybody in the house could not get out. And then they would burn the house down. And so my wife and family would go with me wherever I went. One of the things that Colonel Marion had a edict out for the soldiers. He said, gentlemen, your wives and your daughters can follow you. They can come with the camp. But we will have no camp followers. Camp followers were a nice way of saying women of ill repute. Okay? We will have no camp followers in our camp. If a woman's husband died, the woman has 3 days in camp, then she must leave. If she's not married by the 3rd day. Okay? So, if you lost your husband, you've had this relationship with the other men in his unit. You may be a good seamstress, so you're sewing for them, you're cooking, helping out with that, helping around camp. So you've made friends with these other men, and you know which man you like better, which man you like the best. And so you had a day of courtship, a day of arranging the wedding, and on the 3rd day was the wedding. And so that kept up the morals of the outfit. Another thing that the 2nd South Carolina has unique is at the Battle of Savannah, before Charleston was lost, we went in and fought. The British had taken Savannah, and we were going to go back and free Savannah. Not only the 2nd Regiment, but we had the Continental Line of the South with us. Well, as the Americans attacked the city, the 2nd South Carolina had breached the ramparts. They were inside the city, basically, inside the city walls. Well, the flanks were repelled. They were pushed back from the city, and when they pulled back from their attacks, the entire city then turned their attention to the 2nd South Carolina. Our color bearer was mortally wounded. As he fell, Sergeant Jasper grabbed the flag, grabbed our regimental colors. Today we don't recognize the colors. We burn the colors. That's, a flag. What does it stand for to you? To us, it's a symbol of who we are. As a unit, as a country, those colors are worth killing for. That's how we unite. That's how we recognize each other, is our colors. Well, as they fought this was happening, Sergeant Jasper was mortally wounded. And as he was mortally wounded, Lieutenant Bush grabbed the colors, folded them, and stuffed them in his regimental jacket. Well, as he was fighting, and he was mortally wounded as well, he fell. But he fell within the ramparts of the city. So the British then, as they were cleaning up after the battle, came across the colors inside of his jacket. Well, being where they were in the battle, and that he had lost his life guarding them, they were considered taken under honorable conditions. And being that they were taken under honorable conditions, they were taken back to England. They were presented to the city commander. They were then taken back to England and put on display in the British War Museum for 200 years. In 1975, the British War Museum let us borrow those colors for a year and put them on display in South Carolina. At which time, one of the ladies of our regiment sat down outside of the glass and actually hand-embroidered us a set of colors for our regiment, so that we had an authentic hand-stitched set of colors that matched the original, we thought. We thought that they had used brass string, or gold string, in the embroidery process. Well, in 1982, I think it was, 1985, we were able, with the Smithsonian Institute in South Carolina, to reacquire our colors. So the 2nd South Carolina has unique distinction to have lost their colors in honorable conditions and to have regained their colors. They're now on display in the South Carolina State Museum or in the Smithsonian Institute. But they're the only set of colors that were taken under honorable conditions and returned back to the United States. And as those colors were restored, it was found what we thought was gold thread was actually silver thread that had tarnished. But because we couldn't get to it, we had made ours with gold, but it's actually silver thread that was used. And it was said we had two colors, the red colors and the blue colors. Every morning, every evening, the men were trooped. The men were lined up. The colors were marched across in front of them, back and forth, so you saw the colors every day. Another unique thing about the battle was your headgear. Whatever headgear you had, everyone in your regiment had either the same or very similar headgear. You didn't look at a uniform, you looked at the headgear. One of the things also is all your commands. Your lieutenants, your sergeants didn't yell at the men their commands. They spoke them to a drummer. And the drummer would beat out the command. What we call rudiments in drumming today, each one of them is actually a military command. Forward march, fire, take aim, halt, left, right. All of that is all the rudiments of the drums today, so that we would follow our commands that would be given to us that way. And it was said that during the American Revolution, it was dishonorable to shoot a drummer, because if you shot a drummer, then how could the rest of the troops get their orders? To order to retreat, order to do something. So that's why their colors, we wear red lapels with a blue coat. Our drummers would wear a red coat with blue lapels, with the same hat, the same headgear. And so we would know who they were very easily. Well, after we won the Battle of Camden, next came the Battle of Orangeburg. It was said that it took 5 years to train a soldier to fight in the tactics of the day. The Battle of Orangeburg was in 1781, 5 years after the beginning of the Revolution. A British bayonet charge was considered, like in today's society, of a tank. This is a Brown Bess, a flintlock musket, smoothbore. It's 5'3", muzzle to butt. And so you've got it out here for shooting. I don't aim this musket. It has no sights on it whatsoever. What you see at the end of it is a bayonet lug. The sergeant standing at the end of the line aimed the entire regiment, or the entire company. And so he would say, elevate, lower, left, or right, whatever needed to be done. A bayonet charge is you would fix your bayonets so you can imagine what kind of reach you've got coming at somebody. And if there's 20 of us standing locked shoulder, we're standing shoulder to shoulder. We didn't stand at arm's length apart from each other. We were right beside each other. So you had a wall of bayonets coming at you that's 6 feet, a little bit more than 6 foot out in front of the troops coming at you. And so bayonet charge was really hard to repel, because the British knew that if one of them fell, the next guy would step over the body and keep going. And that's the way the soldiers were trained. Our soldiers were trained in the same fashion of war. Then we turned our back to the British with the Battle of Orangeburg. Then came the Battle of Kings Mountain. Well, in today's armies, you hear of, if you've got the high ground, you've got it won. You've got it taken. Well, in my time, if I'm fighting, when I pull out my cartridge, and if I'm in a regiment, I simply dump the powder down and I drop my musket ball down the barrel. I don't use a patch. So that ball is just laying at the bottom of that barrel loose. So as long as I keep the musket up a little bit, I can shoot anywhere I want to. But when I lower the musket, that ball rolls right back in. So the British having the high ground at the Battle of Kings Mountain was to their disadvantage, because our men are shooting uphill the whole time, they're shooting downhill. So their fire was ineffective into our troops. And so again, the British lost the Battle of Kings Mountain because of that. Next comes the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, at which time, have you seen the movie The Patriot? Okay, the battle where there's the big house sitting out in the middle of the field is a little bit